This committee is now called to order. Everyone please rise and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Madam Clerk, can you call a roll?
Mr. Dragonetti is absent. Mr. Barron?
Here.
Mr. Kroll?
Here.
Ms. Mitchell?
Present.
Ms. Cottenberg?
Here.
Ms. Anderson has asked for an excused absence. Mr. Mota?
Here.
Mr. Ivino is absent. Chairman Jones?
Here.
Ms. Muniz?
Here.
Mr. Terranova?
Here.
And Mr. Zomot.
Here.
Thank you.
Next order of business is we have a motion for approval of the minutes of May 9th, 2016, the first public hearing.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Minutes approved. Public hearing. Is there any member of the public here who wishes to speak? Yes, sir. Your name?
I'm Ed Dodd, live in Sebastian, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'd like to specifically address, if I can, the change that you're proposing to the mayoral, the section for the election of mayor. And I kind of like to look at it from a different perspective than what I read in most of the minutes from the committee when it was discussed. And I'd kind of maybe like to look at it from the perspective as, was there really a crisis of the charter over the period of time in which the city council got sidetracked on that effort. You guys know better than probably anybody in the city what provisions are in the charter related to mayor. There's ample provisions that talk about the election of the mayor, talk about the mayoral duties, that talk about what happens if the mayor does not fulfill his term, if they resign, for example, and that the vice mayor then moves into the mayor's position when that takes place. And I don't think that what occurred during those 3 meetings at the city council really was a result of a crisis on the charter. I think 3 members of the council expressed dissatisfaction with the way the mayor was performing his duties. They have every right to do that. The mayor then chose to resign his position, in which he has every right within the charter to do that, and the vice mayor ascended into the position of mayor. What occurred at that point and further on in the meeting, I can really only describe as the adults left the playground. And the actions that took place from that time forward really don't fall within the guise of the charter, and no change that can be made to the charter will correct that. There's nothing you can do within the Constitution to make the United States any more free or less free. There's nothing you can do to the charter to make actions as those that occurred at the end of that meeting and the next meeting be any more palatable to the citizens of the city of Sebastian, nor to make those actions any less of a potential embarrassment to the city. And so I think that modifying that section of the charter kind of places us right back in a position that occurred when the vice mayor ascended and the adults left the playground. And I think that we're potentially reopening discussions at the council level that are not going to be positive. I think there's a large downside to that and not any upside at all to the charter to make that change. I think that we might once again be reading a headline in the local newspaper that is not complimentary to the city. And what I would like to do is ask you guys to be the adults on the playground and not send that change forward to the city council. Thank you.
Are there any members of this committee would like to speak to that?
I agree with Mr. Dodd. As I'm sure that all of you have heard in the past, I don't like the idea of airing dirty laundry in public. And I feel that the charter is adequate for what it was. And again, if I were to make any changes at all, I would eliminate the term quoted for the vice mayor as well and leave both of those blank. In my opinion, it should be up to a seated council to determine who their mayor is, since the public, by charter, does not elect a mayor in this city.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, sir.
after the last meeting, when we had the revote on that particular issue, I did go back and research via Robert's Rules of Order how that should have occurred. And if you remember back a little while ago, council had a seminar here and determined that committee meetings and board meetings of the city would be run on a modified version of Robert's Rules of Order. So the motion under Robert's Rules of Order, the motion that Ms. Klottenberg made, was called a main motion. It was seconded, it was voted upon, and it was defeated. In order for that to be brought up again, it is called a motion for reconsideration. And the motion for reconsideration has to be made by somebody who voted against the main motion. That was not done. So if we are to revisit that, it would have to be somebody who voted against that, who would make a motion for reconsideration.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to ask our attorney to confirm that those statements are true.
It's true as far as Robert's Rules of Order is concerned. A reconsideration needs to be made by, a motion to reconsider has to be made by somebody on the winning side. But the way it works in practice is if a motion is made and accepted by the chair, if somebody objects, they can challenge the decision of the chair to accept the motion and proceed with a second and a vote. In the absence of that, none of which took place, we can proceed with the second and the vote, as we did. So that's the way it works in real life. I won't go into a dissertation about how I feel about Robert's Rules of Order, but nevertheless, that's how it's done.
I would just like to say that we've discussed this numerous times, we've voted on it numerous times, and the result is what we see here. I don't think we should just keep beating a dead horse, as they say.
So in light of all of that, hearing from a member of the public, is there anyone who was in the majority who would like to make a motion for reconsideration? Hearing none, seeing none, we move forward. Is there any other member of the public who wish to address this committee? Now we move forward to formulate our final recommendations to present to council.
I've got those on page 5, and you can just read those.
Section 2.03, election, change language from 2 years to 4-year terms. Committee members, any comments? Do we need a motion to move forward? No? Okay. Section 2.05, compensation, increase the compensation amounts. Is there any discussion? Section 2.06, mayor, vice mayor, include language defining mayor's term of service.
Mr. Chairman, again, I ask, who writes this the actual language?
Mr. Ginsburg.
I would, the way it works is, there's a presentation made by your chair to the city council. That'll take place on June 8th at the city council meeting. They will have before them the sections of the charter that you wish to change, and you'll make the presentation with respect to the priorities of the committee and the changes that you propose. And then it's up to the city council to decide whether to go forward with any of those or any additional ones that they may choose to put before the voters as well. And they would instruct me accordingly. And then I would come up with proposed language for them, both the charter language as well as the language that would appear on the ballot. And they would consider that information in the form of an ordinance. It requires 2 readings to put a question on the ballot. They can use my language, they can amend my language, and they've done that in the past. The last time around, they made some amendments to one of the proposals. So they can do that. That's how it's done.
Thank you, Robert.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yes, ma'am.
2 out of the 3 issues that we've talked about, I think that there really has been pretty much a general consensus. The 3rd issue is the one that was brought up tonight. And my question is, how do you present to council, or will you present to council, the information that there wasn't a unanimous or overwhelming support for the one contentious item that we have? Is that appropriate, or I'm not sure how that goes, to be honest with you.
Well, personally, I've never done this, but I wouldn't have a problem with, because we have it in the minutes with how many nays and how many yeas. I would tell them exactly what the vote was, and then we would go forward from there.
Okay. Because I agree with our gentleman, Mr. Dodd, tonight, and that's that as these issues move forward to council, you know, they do have the final say. But I appreciate the fact that there is a difference of opinion. I'm not sure, quite frankly, whether or not if this difference of opinion is political, if it's a showing of support for a particular individual, or Mr. Dodd used the word embarrassment. I'm not sure that I felt that way when all of this happened, but I hope that the council members take into consideration the full discussion that we have had. And I guess we'll just see where it lands.
Right, and I was thinking about that. When I present to council, along with each and every one of you, I hope we all show up on June 8th, it would be presented in a way as to not to be airing dirty laundry. It was just put it out there as is, and hopefully not bring up anything from the past, because it's not going to be presented that way. It's just going to be presented from our committee, what we decided to do to bring to council, and we move forward from there. I don't want to open up any discussions about the things that have happened before or anything like that. Just present it, they either accept it or not, so.
I appreciate that. No.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, and we'll move forward to committee discussions. Mr. Zomack?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last page of the information that you have is something that I did at the end of the previous Charter Review Committee. It's simply comments to improve the efficacy of the operation of the committee. This time, we rehashed information almost exactly the same way that we did it 5 years ago. And I would hope that 5 years from now, we could offer suggestions for the people who do volunteer for the committee. These are my ruminations on it. I emailed them to Jeanette, and I would hope that what you would do is review those, and if you have any additional comments to improve how the next Charter Review Committee moves through, that you can simply forward them to Jeanette, and she can add them to this, and it'll be a part of what the next Charter Review Committee sees. No more than that. Thank you.
Any other member have anything to discuss?
Yes. I just
Beth?
have one final comment. I think, is this our last meeting? Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, this was my first Charter Review Committee participation, and it's been interesting and stimulating, and I've learned some things, so I feel like my time was very well spent, and I've also gotten to know some of you a little bit better, so I just wanted to say I've enjoyed the process.
Thank you. Next.
I also agree with Beth as well, and I appreciate the one comment, or only comment from a fellow citizen here in Sebastian. I appreciate your comments, and they're taken to high regard, and I appreciate the comments and opinions of everybody that sits on this committee, and I hope the presentation that we have on June the 8th, I hope that goes very well to the city council members, and as our chairman said, it's time to move forward and not backward. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would just like to thank you, Mr. Jones, for taking on the position of chairing the committee and keeping us straight.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's always a pleasure to deal with the charter and to hear the opinions of the various different people who have served on the committee. As you know, I've been on this committee a number of times. And I appreciate the fact that each committee that has been convened starts out without a history and sees it, the charter, basically with newborn eyes, except for me, of course. My eyes are very old. But I approach this, and I would hope that future committees would approach this task with the perspective that if there were no rules and there were no history, what would we do? And I think that's the best way to encourage an unbiased view of the charter, and I think that that is very, very productive. And I've enjoyed each committee I've ever served on, even though I don't agree on every subject every time. I certainly love hearing the opinions of others. Thank you.
Any other member? Seeing none. Well, this is my first committee. I have never served on a board or a committee in any city government or anything, and I can tell you that I have learned so much being here, and it has been a pleasure serving with each and every one of you, and I love it. I think we'll probably do more of this because I think our city deserves members of our community who are willing to get involved with our government and everything else and make this city work and make this city one of the greatest cities in the state of Florida, if not the United States of America. Thank you all.
Amen.
Did I preach? No. Okay, is there any other business before this committee? Having none, seeing none, hearing none, this committee is now adjourned. Thank you.
Congratulations. See you on the 8th.